Hey y'all, I'm Sunny Shell, and tonight we're going to discuss the importance of science. So sit back, buckle up, and let's go to the sunny spot on Skeptic Haven.
I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I've changed for the better this time. I thought I would never be fine.
Hey everybody! So again, today I have Scientist Mel with me, and I am so excited to have you back.
I love being on your show. It's a lot of fun.
So for those who may not know you or haven't seen you on our show or haven't seen your own YouTube content, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a scientist. I haven't done like research in a little while, but I checked my paper that I did in grad school. It's been cited 125 times. Go me!
Yay! Woo!
I contributed to the body of knowledge. I'm so excited. I'm a chemistry professor. I also do science communication work. I write curriculum for the country now.
Yes.
For secondary schools, for online schools. I do a lot of stuff like that. I do a lot of outreach locally. I'm appearing at Nerd Night in July out in Memphis, Tennessee, which will be cool. I'm going to talk about the fashion of pseudoscience and the designer nonsense. So kind of walks the look of like, pseudoscience is fashionable and who can afford it and when does it become a problem. So I do a lot of that, and I also do a little bit of activism from time to time because, I mean, Roe v. Wade, women, and then women in STEM. We've always had people stealing stuff from us. So, and women put men on the moon, but y'all already know that. But
that's right.
I do all kinds of stuff like that. So thanks for having me back.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for coming back on. So we're just going to jump right in. If you guys in the audience have any questions, please ask them in the chat and I'll be sure to get to them. But just to start off, what made you decide to become a science educator?
Okay. I kind of ended up getting funneled into that. It was weird. When I started college many thousands of years ago, I was pushed into nursing because, oh, you're a girl, you should be a nurse. And, it's great pay. I got all the way into clinicals. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I do not like bodily fluids. Have a thing about it. I'm like, no, I didn't mind surgery, but like stuff that comes out of orifices, I didn't like. So I transferred and thought, I just want to get into like science research. There's lots of gatekeeping that happens in academia. And I did research for one particular man as an undergrad. And I was really considering, I'm like, I'd really like to go to grad school and get more involved in like, viral studies and that sort of thing. He looked at me and said, science is hard and you're a girl, you should be a teacher. And he was on the graduate board. Yeah. And I did undergraduate research for him for a year. There's a reason why there weren't that many graduate students in the biology department there that were women. So he was pretty terrible, and he wouldn't write me a letter of recommendation unless I promised to be a teacher. So I was kind of pushed into that. And then, I have a knack for teaching, so it wasn't too out of character for me. And while I was there, I had to pursue a master's of arts in teaching, specialized in secondary science education in order to keep my job. So I had an undergrad in science, but that wasn't enough. I had to pursue graduate courses in order to be a teacher. And so I got a whole master's degree. And funny thing, where I was teaching at the time, the state had just passed a law saying that you don't have to pay teachers more if they have post-grad degrees. Fortunately, I got grandfathered in, but they're just, a lot of districts do not pay you more for that post-grad degree, yet they require you to have it in order to teach, um, in some cases. So after I did that, I'm like, well, maybe I should get a chemistry degree. Get double major in chemistry. I only needed 3 classes to get a second undergrad in biochem. So I did that. And then the chemistry department was like, hey, you should consider getting a master's in chemistry. And I said, why not? So I left my teaching job and got a master's in chemistry. And that particular path allowed me to go and do like cancer research, computational chemistry. So I really wanted to do research. I didn't want to do a lot of the teaching. But it turns out I'm really good at the teaching, and I'm pretty good at the research. That was a heck of a paper. So now I'm on the collegiate level, and I feel like that's kind of the best of both worlds. I can do research if I want to, but where I'm at, it's more focused on getting students and getting them an education. So I'm able to really kind of, help them not have to deal with the same gatekeeping that I had to deal with. So I feel like I can contribute more on that level, and it's awesome. I love it.
Oh, that's great. I think it's interesting how you were kind of pushed in a way, and it ended up being a kind of a good thing. It sounds like for you, but it was not done in a very good way. It just so happens that it worked out for you. It may have been
Yes.
horrible. It could have very well been horrible.
Kind of was. That first year of teaching, man, this is what I say to people. Get you an undergrad in something that's not teaching.
Yeah.
And then if you like science, if you do like science, get you an undergrad in science, because I promise you, you can get a job in teaching almost right away. And they'll put you on something called a transitional license, to where if you're just taking a class or two at a time just to see if you like it, so you don't end up dumping 30 grand on a master's that they will not pay you more for. So you're
Right.
going to have to really, really like teaching, because they do not pay that back. You can get it forgiven through the public service thing, but that's a lot of hoop jumping. And I'm actually going to call about that this week, because I've taught 8 years. So, and you have to teach 10. So,
Hmm. Yep. I'm jumping through the same hoops because of I work for a qualifying nonprofit. So I just submitted my paperwork. So we'll see. I still have 3 years to go, but they
Mhm.
recommended, especially with the new changes, to go ahead and submit it. And
yeah, I'm
then
going to have to do that. I've taught at 2 different secondary school districts and now 2 different colleges. So I imagine that's a lot of paperwork for me.
it's not too bad. The way that they have it now, it's not too bad.
Okay.
Go
I'm
look
doing
at.
that Friday.
Yeah, you just have to get signatures. That's the hard part. You have to get signatures verifying.
Okay.
But yeah, it shouldn't be too hard. Anyway, we're gonna have a whole discussion about PSLF and
Yes.
what we can try to get our student loans to, because I have a lot. I have about $100,000 worth of student loans, and I'm so tired of it.
I owe more than my house. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, oh my gosh. But anyway, okay. So, what are some of the best aspects of being a science educator?
I really like being able to just kind of have those light bulb moments where you have a student, and I know there are students that hate chemistry, and there's students that hate math. Some, when I used to teach high school biology, high school chemistry, and physical science. So I was certified to teach all of those. But on the college level, it's chemistry. So being able to do something really cool, because we have that curiosity beaten out of us when we're kids. We're told not to get up, not to touch anything. No, don't put that in your mouth. It's just dirt. It's like, what's dirt taste like? Well, let's find out. Shove it in there. It's just, we don't allow kids or teens or anybody really, and even adults, to just be curious. So I kind of like opening up some of those discussions. And one thing that I really like doing in my class is saying, did you guys see anything weird on the internet that was like science like, or maybe it looked like science, but it wasn't? Let's dunk on Gwyneth Paltrow, or something. So we can
Mhm.
pull up bad science or something that's cool or interesting and pull it into the discussion. And I can ask them, what do y'all think about this? And try to draw them in and get them involved. And that's really, really cool. I really enjoy those light bulb moments where they start to get it, and just developing that rapport where you can go, it's okay to get the wrong answer. Let's talk about why it's wrong. I'm wrong a lot. They tell me that on the internet, so it's okay.
So you right now you're teaching at the collegiate level. Didn't you teach at the high school level at one point?
Yes, biology, physical science, and chemistry. I did for about 5 years. Mhm.
Do you feel that you were able to have those light bulb moments and bring
Oh,
things
yeah.
in with those? Because my experience is limited.
Mhm.
Obviously, I've not taught in school, but from my experience, it seems like you're more teaching for a test than
Oh
you are
god, yeah.
teaching to teach. And so I'm just curious, did you have that experience? Do you feel like you have more of those light bulb moments on the collegiate level?
I do have them more on the collegiate level because a lot of those people are there because they wanna be.
Mhm.
And, but I did have those moments teaching in high school. But it's harder because you're dealing with kids. Some of them don't wanna be there. You also have kids who I had one student, she was just, oh gosh, she had so many behavior issues, and I didn't know this at the time. Um, but she lived with her grandparents, and her grandfather beat her every day. I didn't know that. So you have, and then the cops had been called. I found out the next year after she had left my class that the guidance counselors had called the cops, they'd called DHS, they called everybody that they could. And the guidance counselor just had this girl had her phone number. And anytime she was upset, she's like, look, I'll just come get you. Or if he's going to hurt you, just run out of the house. I mean, it was that kind of level. And I didn't quite understand, but I knew she was smart, and I pushed her. I'm like, you got this. You got this. Come on. Give me just a little something. You're so smart. The next year she came back and she said, I know I was really tough in your class. But I want to say you're the best teacher I ever had. And I just wanted to cry because I found out after that she had been going through all of that. And she really was smart. She had so much potential. I don't know what she's doing now, but she had, I mean, you deal with a lot of that you wouldn't necessarily deal with on the collegiate level. So it's having
Right.
to navigate that stuff made it really, really hard sometimes.
Yeah. That goes into my field because I deal with the kids who have been abused, and
Mhm,
I'm the one that, or not me personally, but my agency, we
mhm.
all get those kids that you're talking about when the guidance counselor or whatever makes a report. We try to make sure that the child doesn't have to have that person to call and run out of the house, that they actually get some interventions. So
Mhm.
anyway, off onto another tangent there. And that wasn't one of the questions that I originally had for you, but I was
Mhm.
curious about that. So it's good to know that you did see those light bulb moments even in the
I
high school
did.
level. Um, I think that speaks more to you and your
Ah,
your philosophy on teaching, because I think there's a lot of teachers who can just kind of teach to the test.
and a lot of them do because, 50% of my valuation was based on how well these kids did on a test,
Hmm.
and the people that hurt me more than anybody else were the smart kids
Yeah.
because they had predictive scores, and they were predicted to get, like, all but 1 wrong, and so if they got
Wow.
2 wrong, it tanked my score as a teacher. "Oh, well, you didn't challenge this kid enough." So that smart kid missing 2 instead of just 1 tanked my score as a teacher. Now, if I had a kid that had failed every year and then they came to my class and did a D instead of an F, that raised my score exponentially. But they never tell you what the equation is. They just, it's so arbitrary. They don't tell you how they calculate any of that. So all I know is make certain the smart kids are challenged enough. Well, I had one get in a wreck on their way to take that test. What was they going to say? Please only miss one. I know you just totaled your car. You're totally fine. I know. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's terrible.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, I think it's ridiculous. They have got to think of a different way to, I get that we all need to have evaluations and, we need to strive to be the best we can be, but the way that they have it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's weird.
So I do have another question for you that I think is extremely important with, we talked about it a little bit at the very beginning. Like you had said, with all the things with Roe v. Wade and so forth. As a science educator, have you seen a rise in anti-science viewpoints?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have, because we have a lot of misinformation gets passed around a lot, and particularly with vaccines, actually what COVID-19 is, you got that, you got climate change, all kinds of anti-science on that. People don't like to have to change their lives for a thing. We have seen that a lot lately. And so it's a lot easier to say something is not true than it is to actually face it. So I've seen a lot of anti-science just pop up. I've been called a Monsanto shell before by
Wow.
by a science writer because I said GMO's kind of dumb, this anti-GMO status. Monsanto's done a lot for genetically modified foods. Now, given I don't agree with their business practices, but we can't say GMO is bad. And they're like, you sound like a shill for Monsanto. And I'm like, man, I wish.
That'd be some good money.
Give me some cash, man. I'll put it towards funding for like education or something. I don't know. But it's just I've been called all kinds of things. Monsanto shill. I've nothing really about NASA. But there's a lot of anti-science rhetoric because people don't like change, and change is scary, and it's easier just to believe something that's not true, I guess.
Right. And, I think that critical thinking is something that is not necessarily focused on.
No.
I think once you get into college, you are faced with critical thinking skills, and it's I think where you really get it. It's why so many people change when they go to college in so many different ways. But before that, it's not something that's really focused on.
It's really not. You're taught how to teach a test. Now, this is one of the challenges that I face, having seen both sides of that, being a high school teacher and now a college professor of sorts. I know what's coming in because I taught what's coming in. And they don't, a lot of teachers do not teach critical thinking because they really haven't gone through a lot of it themselves. I've actually had to train science teachers in one particular county where I was teaching who did not understand some of the basic terminology that was in the textbook. They didn't know what somatic meant. They didn't know how to teach genetics. And I had to go about it in a way where they're like, well, how do you teach genetics? I'm like, hey, well, let me tell you, this is what I do now. It may not work for you, but this seems to work for me a little bit in my classroom. So I had to go about it in like a very loving and sweet way to go, you're teaching stuff that's really wrong. Even the practice tests for the practices that they gave from the state had wrong answers. And I'm going,
wow.
Like, it's just crazy. So, and there's one county, I wrote all their common assessments and they still use them, which is cool for their biology courses. So that's fun. But there's a challenge. There's just, those kids they haven't been taught how to think. So when they get to my class, I spend a lot of time in my lectures. I go through it in the same problem-solving manner. What is it asking? what's our plan? How are we going to figure out how to get the answer? So we go through and we do that. Okay, now let's write out this equation, but in words instead of just writing out the symbols, because that freaks people out. They're not used to that. And then, all right, now let's match up the words in the problem to the variables. Okay, check our units. Where are the traps? So I go through and I have to model and scaffold. This is what my brain goes through when I see a problem, and I write it out this way every single time. And they'll even catch me when I get something wrong. You wrote that decimal in the wrong place. I'm like, see, this is why I write it down. Why didn't the rest of y'all find that? So there's not a lot of that modeling, and a lot of the teachers, they don't have, particularly with science, in many states, they're not required to get a science degree. So they haven't been through the practice of critically thinking like a science degree person has.
Right. I completely, when I got my undergrad in psychology, at that point, I really wanted to go to work for a little while, and then I was going to continue on, and I was going to do what was called lateral entry teaching. So you can go in with a psychology degree, and I could teach science. I don't have a science degree, but I could teach science. I could teach American history. I could teach social studies. There were all these different things that I could teach with a psychology undergrad.
Wow.
And to me, that makes no sense. It makes zero sense. You know, I mean, I was happy that I was given the opportunity. I ended up not going that route, but I was happy that I was given that opportunity for a job, but I was petrified that I was going to be teaching things I wasn't qualified to teach.
That's scary.
Yeah,
that's
it is.
really scary because you already have imposter syndrome. At least I do.
Yep.
And I'm like,
I still do.
You want me to do what? Okay, sure. Fake it till you make it.
Yes, exactly. It's like, and you know, those, you go into a high school classroom and those kids will pick up, they have like antenna for bullshit. And they're
yes,
like,
they do.
Oh my gosh, this person does not know what they're talking about. And I did not want to be ripped to shreds because I just knew that would happen.
Oh,
so yeah,
my gosh.
That's crazy. So, well, I'm going to kind of mix things up with how I was thinking about, because this kind of makes me curious. What are some of the most annoying science myths that you've heard?
Oh, things that people think are real that aren't? Oh gosh, the whole binary sex thing is pretty annoying. So, just so you guys know, the Y chromosome is steadily shrinking and might go away. I mean, we're there almost every single time, with a couple generations, that Y chromosome gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And the only thing on it is don't be a girl. That's literally it. That's it. There's genetic code that prevents you from becoming, like, having secondary characteristics of a woman.
Wow.
The default is female, essentially. And there's all kinds of different ways that could not go exactly the way that you think. You can have androgen insensitivity, where you can have a Y chromosome and your cells just do not respond to testosterone. So you develop as a woman, right? That was one of the fun things I used to tell in biology class from, like, my high school students. I'd be like, binary is a lie, guys. Some of them supermodels that you look at, they're probably genetically men. And they're like, oh my God, does that make me gay? I'm like, no, it doesn't. But I'm just telling you, it's not so cut and dry, but people treat it like it is. Anything beyond high school biology, they're just like, my brain's not working anymore. Like, that's not how it works. You can have XXX, you can have 3 X's, you can have XYX, you can have XYY, you can have essentially intersex. You can have all kinds of ways that your body doesn't respond to specific hormones. We already know that the brain can be wired differently to where it exhibits that of somebody that you would consider the opposite sex. So it's like, the binary is a complete and total lie, and it might go away. Is that Y chromosome?
That's very fascinating. I mean,
it shrinking.
Yeah, wow, that so many questions now. But I've known for a long time that binary is just ridiculous. That there is a complete spectrum, both on the biological and on the gender social side of it, on that whole thing. So, I mean, are there any other science myths
that the Big Bang happened at one spot?
Yes,
it did not happen at one spot. It happened all over the place in multiple spots all at once. It wasn't a singularity in one area. It was in lots of different areas. That's why it's kind of difficult to pinpoint, but we know that it happened because we can detect the remnants of it. We can still detect the remnants of it, and we can back calculate all the way from just the residual elements that are in the universe and what stars are made of. So we can actually track back and see that. People are like, oh, it's just the theory. Big Bang didn't happen. Well, yes, it did. You can see it. You can see it. You can see all of the stuff that came from that. And there's only one way that all of this could have happened. It's from a singular point, but not just in one spot, all over. And it just expanded. So that's another one. It's kind of like, that makes me nuts.
Well, I'm not a scientist, but you touched on one that annoys me is the layman theory versus the scientific theory, and people not understanding the difference between the two. That frustrates the crap out of me. Do you have any other myths that you wanted to bring up before we move on?
I'm trying to think. There are so many that are just, oh gosh, it's mostly just pseudoscience stuff. People think chiropractors are doctors, and they're not. I knew a chiropractor who was teaching a chemistry lab, and he said that we needed to put plants in there so it could filter out the air. I'm like, well, that's why we have vent hoods, but okay, dude. He was like, this chemical causes cancer, and I'm like, they're not gonna drink it. That's why what your job is to make certain they don't, and they're adults.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious.
I'm like, they're not rubbing it on their bodies or anything. So
right. Yeah, exactly. So what are some ways that we can be science advocates, especially to me, I feel like we are entering an age where science denial is and anti-science is worse than it's been with the political and religious kind of push, those two marrying each other. So what do you think we can do to be better science advocates?
That's pretty interesting. I saw a study once about anti-vaxxers. And I'll have to find it again. There was a project that was done called Immunity Community, and a bunch of pediatricians and healthcare workers and that sort of thing, rather than go out to the community and talk about how vaccines were important, they got parents to do it, because other parents are more likely to listen to parents who had vaccinated their kids. And that makes them more approachable, because a lot of the population's like, well, scientists are just hoity-toity, and, they're shills, and they're this and that. But if you have everyday people who aren't necessarily scientists going up and saying, hey, I was thinking about you, and I was really kind of worried. Have you been vaccinated yet? This new strain that's coming out, man, it's really hitting people hard. I just, wanted to find out if you're okay. You kind of approach it from, as a lay person, going up to another person that's anti-science, and just come from a place of caring. It's really hard to, yell at a person. I could go up and say, hey, I'm worried about you. You're just a scientist and you get money from the vaccines. But somebody who isn't that way, could go up and say, yeah, I got vaccinated, and my kids got vaccinated, and my neighbors, boy, they got really sick. How are you doing? Are you okay? That's one way that we can be science advocates, is by having people who aren't scientists approach people who are anti-science in like a caring kind of way, and that's really hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of like the street epistemology method in the sense we can just ask questions,
Mhm.
So why do you think that? Let's have a talk about that. What's
Mhm.
your, where did you come up with that? Or,
Mhm.
just asking them very empathetic questions and
Right.
trying to get them to think is probably. Do you have any others though that you think that we might need to be thinking about?
Well, one thing that I had to do, and this was particularly difficult because I was teaching evolution out in the Bible Belt, was trying to make yourself not be a threat.
Mm.
And I had really smart students who were super fundamentalist, and I challenged them. I challenged the way that they were thinking, but I also gave them some aftercare of sorts, because there's never any of that. When you give somebody information, there's so much cognitive dissonance that it can wreck them emotionally. Because when you
Yeah.
have a smart person and they have been denying evolution for so long, and you're like, hey, I'm just here to make certain you understand that this is what these words mean. And I don't have a degree in religion, so I don't teach that. But I can at least, tell you what these words are. And you present this evidence, and it's irrefutable. And they're so smart. You can see that struggle on their face. They have to come to terms with, is this scientist who's been really nice to me and just is non-threatening, says it's okay for me to believe whatever I want to, is she wrong or is my family wrong? And there's no care after that. People
Yeah.
just fall apart. And so to be able to say, hey, it's all right. You don't have to make any decisions or anything. Think about stuff. I just want you to just digest this information. And it's all right if you decide you don't want to believe it. It's okay. I'm just here for you. And I just want to make certain you're all right. There's none of that often. There's no follow-up of care when you hit somebody who's anti-science with stuff that's just irrefutable. If they do listen, it just breaks their heart, man.
Yeah, and that would be with whether it's science or any other topic. I think that
Mhm.
what I'm hearing and what I feel and I agree with is compassion
Mhm.
and empathy are really the keys to just about anything.
Pretty much. I love Mr. Rogers, and some days Mr. Rogers would not be proud of me. I'm not very nice to certain high-powered people on the internet, but I don't punch down.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I have I like this one from Wes. He asked, "Does the cold outside cause colds?" Since we're on myths, I thought that might be a good time to go ahead and show his question.
Does the cold cause colds? Well, it depends. You could have things that could lower your immunity response. Sometimes if you get really cold, that might impede a bit of your blood flow, right? So you don't have as much circulation going on. So in that respect, you could breathe in like a virus if you just happen to be walking, but you still have to be exposed to the virus. Being cold by itself doesn't. Being cold and being exposed to a virus, you probably have an increased chance of getting sick than if, you were warm.
Right. Yeah. I've always thought that one of the reasons we get more colds in the wintertime is because people tend to be indoors around each other.
That's a good point too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So um, I saw a question in the chat. I won't put it up because I think I get how the question was meant.
Okay.
And I don't know how you're going to feel about this one. I'm just going to. So,
Okay.
how do you feel about teachers, either in the high school level or collegiate level, being armed, having to have weapons?
It's a terrible idea.
I agree with you.
It is a terrible idea. I can tell you why.
I would love to hear your reasons why.
I worked at one high school for several years, and one of the chemistry teachers, again, keep in mind where I had taught at the time, you didn't need a degree in chemistry to teach chemistry. You just needed an education degree and take a test. That's it. This person likely got their job because their mom worked at the board. I was standing in the hallway, as I do, and I listened to some of the science teachers because I'm trying to, chill and hang and fit in because I'm weird. So he's standing there and he's talking about how he could deal with the black on black crime in the city if they just let him take his gun downtown. He said this while we're in between classes and students walking by. He would talk about often how he would love to have a gun in the school because then he could shoot anybody that was trying to shoot the kids. This man was huge. He could easily be shot, and somebody could take his gun almost immediately. But he had this John Wayne fantasy that somehow that wasn't going to happen to him. And on top of that, he was racist because he said the black on black crime thing. I had to stop spending time in the hallway with these people because that's not what I taught in my classroom. I did not teach any of that. I taught the importance of diversity, biodiversity, especially in biology. And then I had to report that teacher. He still has a job. So, no, teachers do not need guns. I would be terrified if I worked on a campus where teachers were armed because of people like that. The only thing cops have done with being in schools is increase the amount or basically feed the funnel from school to prison. Kids get arrested for things that just they were doing as kids. They vandalized this school. Let's throw them into juvenile. They drew a penis on the side of it. So what? They drew that on my desks. I'm not going to sit there and send them to jail because they drew a penis on my desk and went, oh, penis. I'm like, yeah, don't you wish you had one? And then you walk off. It's sorted. That one looks bigger than probably yours, or just whatever. You make some stupid joke, probably not a sexual one, but you make a stupid joke and then they feel dumb and then they don't do it anymore. I mean, but they're getting arrested and body slammed on the ground and they're getting beaten up. And I had a student there was a student I was an advocate for who was on the spectrum. And one group of administrators at the school completely ignored their diagnosis, refused to update their paperwork, did not meet with the parent, and then had worked it out to where they would frame this child with the cop to put them into alternative school because they didn't want to have to meet their needs. So, no, we don't need guns. And that cop almost shot the kid. So,
wow.
2 advocacy groups got involved in addition to myself. And I didn't back down. I was like, man, so no, we don't need guns in a school when we have so much unregulated abuse that goes on right now. The good news is that district is now on the radar of those advocacy groups.
Yes, so that is the silver lining to that cloud. But wow, I mean, when you think about it, especially in the high school level, you like we've talked about, both of us have experienced where you don't have to have anything more than an undergrad degree in either education or something that you can get a lateral entry in.
Right.
That means that it's just everyday people out here in the, who have their own biases, who have their prejudices, who have their viewpoints, and you're throwing them in, with kids who have a lot of hormones, and then you throw them a gun. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And it's a shame that in the conversation that we're having, that's even something that we talk about. But it is the reality. It's the reality of the world that we live in.
I mean, it is. I mean, you're right. I I don't want any cops in schools. It's a freaking nightmare. I've hated being in a school with cops. I don't feel safe when they're there. I feel like if we had money and we funneled towards having more school counselors, community programs to make certain these kids had clothes, better food. There's studies that show if kids eat well, they do better with their behavior. They need recess. Even high schoolers need time to just chill and decompress. That money could be funneled into that. That's what we need. We don't need teachers need to be, well, of course, teachers need to be trained more, yes, but they need help. They need assistance to help them manage classrooms. They need to have access to resources. We need kid psychologists in there to be able to work with students who are having a hard time with social issues, making certain they get their basic needs met. That's what we need. That's how we're going to sort this, but districts aren't ready to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, all right, moving back into our regular discussion. We're kind of all over the place, but I think we've gone in some really interesting and cool directions, though.
Yes.
So my next question is, who is or are the scientists that you admire most, and why?
Oh gosh, there are so many. There were some scientists that I didn't learn about until I started watching this show, the Neil deGrasse Tyson version of Cosmos. There's one episode in the first season called Sisters of the Sky, where women essentially mapped the stars and they wrote it down. They got the spectroscopy. Spectroscopy is one of the coolest things. It's so cool because every single element, every single compound has their own color signature. So we can determine what atmospheres are like on other planets because of spectroscopy. We can go through and see what those spectral lines are and go, oh, wait, that's methane. That whole planet probably smells like a fart. Just stuff like that. And I like that. Marie Curie did a lot of work, and she gets a lot of flack because of radiation. But not a well-known thing about her is she helped develop, along with her daughter, the first portable X-ray because troops on the battlefield during the World War, they were having their legs cut off because of twisted ankles or broken legs or something. There wasn't enough time to accurately diagnose out in the field. So Marie Curie's daughter came to her. She was a medical doctor, and she said, look, there's this thing called X-ray. Will you please help me with this? Help me make this portable X-ray because look, they're cutting off people's legs and arms over something that's minor. And so she did. Went out in the field, had a portable X-ray with her daughter. So again, she gets some flack, but she really did a lot of super awesome stuff. I like Professor Brian Cox. He's out of Manchester.
I love him.
He's so great. He wrote a book. I forget who the co-author was. E = MC squared and why we should care. And why do we care? I love that book. That's probably the last book I read for fun outside of reading The Demon Haunted World again for I don't know how many times. Carl Sagan. But
yes, I love Carl Sagan's books.
He writes so well.
Yes.
And then, but Professor Brian, I really did not like or enjoy physics so much because math scared me. I read that book and I went and he goes through the derivation of the energy equation. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, wow. I love this so much. Why couldn't he have been my physics teacher? Because I get it. He explains it so well. And I'm like, where was he? Why? I need to just. And one time I tweeted, next time I'm in England, I'm going to go and crash one of Professor Brian's lectures at Manchester U. Manchester U tweeted me back, said, look, we love Professor Brian too, but please don't do that. I'm like, that's how I'm going to end up in prison in the UK.
That's funny. I love, I'm right along your lines because I love Brian Cox and I love the way that, first of all, he has that big smile on his face all the time. He makes you feel like science is not that scary, like you were talking about, but not just the math. He takes all of the concepts and talks to you like as if we're talking about, what we're going to have for dinner tonight. I mean, he puts it down to earth, and he has that smile and that accent. And how can you not?
Well, it's
So,
funny.
I was just going to say really quickly, my dog keeps whining outside the door. So if you guys hear that, it's not like my stomach or something. It's my dog whining. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I used to play a lot of Brian Cox's videos in my biology class because I could pull it up. And so I used a lot of technology in my biology class because I loved it. Because it covers a lot of the stuff that we talk about. One of my favorite series by him was The Human Universe. Have you seen it?
I've seen parts.
You have to watch the whole thing. It's amazing. He gets into the evolution of the human brain and how is it that we're the only animals that we know of that have managed to make it to outer space. Why didn't other animals do that? So it's really cool. And it's funny because I would always play either Brian Cox or I would play Neil deGrasse Tyson, like Cosmos or, it's The Human Universe or whatever. One of the things from I've seen everything. There's just a long list. And it was funny. Some of my straight cis little girls would be like, can we watch another Brian video? And the guys are like, the straight cis guys were like, I don't know, I kind of want to watch Cosmos again because explosions, boom, and it was like, one of them looked at me and said, he just has such a great voice. I'm like, I get you.
Oh, I totally get. Oh, my poor dog. I feel bad for him because he can't get in and he hears me talking. And he's like, Mommy, why can I not be with you? Normally my husband has him, but he doesn't. So it's like, just ignore him. I promise I will love on him and give him all the attention in just a minute. One of the next questions I wanted to ask you. And really quickly, I want to say with Neil deGrasse Tyson, I watched some of his early YouTube videos before he became famous.
So he had like a little hipster fan.
Yes, yes, and it's like, oh my gosh! Right before he became famous, I had a chance to become Facebook friends with them, and it was like I didn't have enough time. I was out somewhere, or I didn't have enough signal or something to actually click on it, and I missed my opportunity. And that's one of the worst things that I could have been Facebook friends with him. Hey, that's not just following him, but an actual friend. Okay, so what scientific issues do you feel are the most important ones?
Well, right now, climate change and vaccinations and reproductive rights. Probably, reproductive rights are kind of at the top because all of the things that are associated with that have to deal with the right to privacy. And that doesn't just affect women. It affects everybody. So if they can say a woman does not have a right to privacy for her own medical decisions, that can translate and have a domino effect. So that's one thing that I'm really concerned about. And people saying that, well, that you can hear the heartbeat. That's not a heart though. You're hearing a couple of cells that sound like a heart, but it's not a formal heart. Right. It's just a couple of cells reacting to a nerve impulse. I mean, you're talking a small amount. It's not even a functional heart. It's not doing anything. And then you have also, Roe v. Wade was scary for trans women and gay people. Yeah, they're not far behind. And then who knows? Maybe they'll just decide segregation was a great idea and just, golly, it's horrible. And then you consider the vaccinations and that sort of thing. I have a nephew who is finally cleared of bone cancer recently. I got to see him yesterday for the first time in about a year. I haven't been able to visit him because I wasn't going to be the one to give him an illness. He was immunocompromised. And a lot of people don't understand, vaccines don't just help you, they help other people. Like my nephew, who had a rare bone cancer, had part of his bone cut out of his body in order to kick this with chemo and radiation. It's not just about you.
Right.
There's that, and then climate change. I recently got an electric car because I don't want to pay $400 a month for gas anymore, and a car note is cheaper.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. As far as the vaccine part, do you think? I'm just curious. Do you think that if everyone would have been responsive and responsible, and that they would have listened to the scientific experts, worn a mask because that was a big deal. What's the word I'm looking for? Kept away from people, social distanced and all of those things. Did not have the mass spreader events, and then became vaccinated when they should have. Do you think that we could have prevented having all of these strains, these different strains that we've had? Do you think we could have actually stopped it from being a continual thing?
We could have certainly reduced the risk of that. I don't know if it would have completely have gone away, but essentially when you're dealing with an RNA virus, it has a high rate of mutation. Now, my friend, Doc Savage, he's like a senior director of a very important company in Europe. Now he's Tony Stark in a company. He's a biotech immunologist wizard, a Tony Stark of biotech. I'll just say that. I default to his expertise on this sort of thing. And he also gives talks at my college about this, trying to raise awareness about this sort of thing, because there's so much misinformation. If everybody had done that, if everybody had stayed home, if everybody had worn a mask, if everybody had gotten vaccinated, we would have reduced the amount of people that the virus could have made a lot of copies in. And every time it makes a copy of itself, hijacking your cell technology, your own cells, because it has to use your cells to make copies of itself. It can't do that by itself. So getting vaccinated reduces that viral load. Therefore, you're not likely to spread it so much. And if everybody's vaccinated, nobody gets severely ill. And the people who can't get vaccinated take those extra precautions. You reduce your risk to tiny percentages. So yeah, in that respect, yeah, it wouldn't be nearly as bad as it is right now. It would have been reduced quite a bit.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where I was thinking, but I didn't know, what, I didn't have any basis to, any knowledge base to go on. It was just kind of, I guess, deductive reasoning. So the final question that I have for you is, what do you think the next 10 years of science will bring?
Wow.
That's a big one.
It is. We have the James Webb Telescope just came out with its first images. So we get to look even further into the universe and see more representation of the Big Bang, because it happened. Because you can see it. So that will be cool to see what's going on with that. I'm hoping we get another. I think the ISS is probably on its last leg pretty soon. Because it'll break out of orbit probably within the next few years. I don't know the number of years, but a lot of the science that's happened in that microgravity environment has been amazing. It's been amazing. We'll probably see more advances in stem cell technology, immunotherapies. There have been successful instances of people having their immune system rewired to fight their own cancer. We'll see more vaccine technology, particularly with messenger RNA, kind of like the same as the COVID-19 vaccine, the Pfizer one. I'm trying to think. So we'll see some more medical breakthroughs as long as there's still funding. Hopefully, we'll see more stuff with engineering when it comes to combating climate change. Like I said, I just got an electric car. It's kind of cool. I'm hoping that the tech gets a bit more accessible because it's a used car. Elon doesn't have any of my money. I got me a little Nissan Leaf, and it's cool because every time you brake, it regenerates your battery for you and extends the number of miles. So I'm like, this is cool. I'm going to drive slow like a grandma.
Or
Get
just
me
keep your
going.
foot on the brake.
Just brake. Make everybody mad around me.
Yeah.
So we'll probably see more tech like that. I'm hoping we get some more advances in education. I'm not too I'm trying to be hopeful. I'm pushing for more high impact practices on the collegiate level, which is part of what I'm doing at the new college that I'm at. Trying to incorporate more technology, help boost critical thinking, put a little bit of advocacy in there, helping to kind of break down some of that gatekeeping that we see in academia. That probably cost me a job once because I said academia had gatekeeping, and there was an old man on the panel, and I'm like, he probably didn't like that. But stuff like that.
So Jenny said, did you know railroad locomotives have been using regenerative braking systems for decades?
No, I didn't. And I want to see some actual trains in the U.S. My God. I would
with
love
that. Yes. Some like they have in Europe, some actual good high speed, high speed trains.
Yes. It's like you go, I've been to London so many times. I've still got my Oyster card. I just recharge it when I'm there. I'm like, you just hop on a train, you go somewhere. You don't have to worry about driving. It's great. You can just sit and read a book. You can listen to music, plan your day. Like that would save me so much time instead of having to drive an hour in my electric car because I can't go on the interstate with it.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I want to thank you so much for coming on.
This is fun.
I said top of the hour. And I don't know why I turned into a news person. I hate it when I do that. I've said that a couple times on the show, but you know what I mean. We're getting close to the end of the show. It's always so enjoyable to have you on.
I have fun. Thank you so much for having me back.
Absolutely. So first I want to thank all the people who are in the chat. I do see your guys' comments. I just, I have like a brain that can't type and be in the chat at the same time that I'm engaging with the guest. And I really want to give you, the guest, all of my attention. So I just want to say thanks to the Sinister Porpoise, Jenny Morgan, Beach Price. We had Titan in there. Kat, the humanist. We had Farron Salas in there, theoretically. Thank you guys so much. I know I'm missing a bunch, but I just wanted to kind of name a few. Just thank you guys for coming in. We really appreciate everything that you guys do. Without you guys, we would not be able to do the show that we do. I want to thank the producers, Wes, Phil, and Kat, and the booking team, Aaron and Shane. If you like the content that you see here, remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell, share, all those cool things, and consider becoming a Patreon because that will really help us. Our current patrons are Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Bryce, Deborah Grace, Aaron, Phil, and me. If you would like to maybe come on at some point and be able to ask our guests, like Scientist Mel, a question on air, those are some of the perks we're looking at for the Patreon. So you might get a link and be able to come on and ask your question. So think about doing that. We would really love to have you on. Don't forget our other shows like Secular Soapbox, Women Atheist Unloaded, The Bible Says What, and Sandbox Debates. In the meantime, between now and the next time we meet again, as we talked a lot about on this show, remember to always think critically. Good night, everybody.